What's up everyone, welcome back to FullThrottleRC. Today we're starting a build series for a scale body for my MST RMX 2.0. I sort of debuted this body in my last video on this car, mentioned the fender flares that I had for it, and said that I wanted to build it. I made a post when I first started working on it and asked if anyone was interested in a build series, and seemed like a lot of you wanted to see it, so here we go. I started off by cutting out the SRC fender flares. This kit isn't specifically made for this body, so I have to do some trimming and cutting to get them to fit on the body where I want them. It's kind of like a complete custom kit at this point, which is why I went ahead and did one side before I turned on the camera. So I know it's a little difficult to get the idea of it with it all still being clear and not painted, but I went ahead and cut the Lexan fender flares to fit around the body lines of the car. I didn't want to lose any of the body lines, such as the vent in the car, and I also didn't really want to lose the body lines back here, so I had to trim it a little bit to make it fit the car. But I actually really like the way it's fitting right now. Now comes the hard part, which is getting the other side to match this side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull these off and kind of use them as a template to cut the opposite side. It'll be kind of hard because it's a mirrored, but I'm gonna do my best with it. You can only look at one side at a time, so I'll get it as close as possible and hopefully it'll look good. So before I pulled them off, I went ahead and took a couple of dimensions, couple of key dimensions to locate the passenger side ones in the same area as the driver's side. Ideally, what I want to do is get the passenger side to match exactly to the driver's side. So you would think I could just go ahead and kind of line these up and get a rough estimate of how the cut should be, and that's what I want to do. But I also want to show you how I went ahead and cut these to fit this body well and form them to the body. So I'm going to use these as a guide, but I also want to go ahead and show you how I got to this point instead of just tracing them out, cutting them and throwing them on the body and calling it a day. So I'm going to start with the back, and to start out I'm going to transfer those measurements I took on the opposite side. Just basically a rough measurement. Like I said, you can only see one side at a time, so it doesn't need to be perfect, but I want it to be kind of close. The back side of the rear one I didn't really mess with much. It stayed basically exactly the same as the original cut was, so when I have this lined up, I can now come and line this up about where it should be. What I'm going to do now is tape this in place so that I can go ahead and line up the rest of the flare and mark the holes where I need to put the holes at for the screws. The screws that come with the fender flares are really tiny. I don't even know if you can see that on camera. It's not ideal to drill them, obviously. I actually started out using a needle, and I heated up the needle and would puncture straight through the body. But I figured out a really sharp X-Acto blade works just as well. You don't have to heat anything up at all. Just kind of poke it and twist it a little, and it'll go through the flare and through the body. Then we can take a screw, get it started in there, and that's one down. So now what I do is kind of work my way around till I get to this portion of the fender flare that I'm going to have to start cutting here. So this is where I'm going to start using the other side as a template, but I want to explain what I did here first. You can see the flare kind of flares out a lot right here in the front of it, right in front of the wheel well, and that's because of all of this material here sticking out in the front, hitting the body. I want that to kind of tuck in a little more, and I also want to keep this body line here. So I'm gonna kind of trace this one, but in reality what I did was try to keep as much of this body line as possible, and then I put a screw on the top and bottom of the body line. So I put one here, and then I put one in this corner here. Unfortunately, this back vent gets kind of covered up, but it still looks good when it's finished. I also made a slight cut in here right along the body line so that the top part of this flare kind of pushes in and the bottom part rides along this bottom line. Really need to get me some Lexan scissors one of these days. Now I just need to go in and trim a little bit of the original body so that you don't see it underneath there. Both sides of the back are done now. Now it's time for the fun part. Pretty obvious how much I ended up cutting this other side fender flare for the front. You can see this is the original and this is what the driver's side front looks like now. It's pretty drastic, the difference. I'm going to try to explain how I got to this point, but it's a little difficult. So I have my two marks here for my measurements to line it up in the same spot as the driver's side. What I tried to do was line up the inside of the wheel arch here with the inside of the actual body wheel arch as best as possible, and I kind of just taped it in place. So as we get it taped on, the first problem we can see is it kind of bows up here, covers up this front vent, and it doesn't allow it to sit flush here. So the first two things I do is I'm going to trim off at the bottom where it sits on this same body line, and then I'll also trim around where the vent is. I'm actually gonna put this up to the one for the driver's side and make sure they're the same, but I'm hoping you're getting the idea here of how I did the driver's side. So now already we can see how much better this is gonna fit. Maybe still a little sanding to do here around the vent, but we can already see how much better that fits, and then we'll slowly work our way and make it work around the front. Just continuing on now, on the opposite side I kind of trimmed the top a little bit towards the back. So to get that the same, I'm just lining it up and marking it out. It was only to about right here, about an inch or so. It's not much, just a little bit to kind of clean it up, I guess. So I want to mark that out right quick. And I'm also going to mark a couple more holes just so I'll be ready to start putting holes. I can put holes about halfway through here before I got to start doing any more cutting on the front here. The front's got to be cut a good bit, as you see. We'll get to that in a second. So now to come down to the front, obviously it's way far past here, and if I just pinned it where it's at, this wheel well comes way too tight. I also can't push it towards where the wheel well is, because then it bows up a lot on the top here, and I can't do nothing with that excess material. So the best thing for me to do is to let it just come down and follow the top line of the material and come in and trim this afterwards. Again, I'm using the other side as a template just because I want them to be the same. So I know that this one needs to be cut here, but when I come and push it down here to make this flush, you can see where it lines up directly on that body line. So like I mentioned, now it looks good here sitting flush against the body, but my wheel well is way off now. The best way I can explain it is I tried to make it fit close to what the original was. So I kind of drew out where it was originally, made it kind of meet up at the top here. And once again, you're probably tired of hearing me say it now, but I'm gonna use the driver's side one just as a mock-up to make sure I get them exactly the same. Now I'm gonna get this one back off, cut that out, and trim the body just like I did on the other side. You can see I kind of opened up the wheel well a good bit. I actually saved the piece from this side so I can spin it around, mirror it, and mark it out here and cut out the exact same piece. I got all four flares back on the car. I know it's not the easiest to see with the body still being clear with no paint on it, but you can kind of get an idea of what I'm going for here, how the flares will look on the car, how the wide body kit I guess will look on the car. I'm really liking the way it looks so far. I'll try to get some more close-up shots of it so you can see what I'm seeing. Hopefully it comes out well in video. It's definitely a whole lot of screws, whole bunch of little bitty screws, but it does look pretty scale. I like the way it looks. And once they're on there after it's painted, they won't need to come off again. So it's not that big of a deal. They are a little long. You can see them sticking out all over in there. My plan is to probably just cut those down before I install them finally after everything's painted. Just trim them and reinstall them. That definitely took a little more work than I first anticipated, but the fender flare kit was definitely not made for this body specifically. It's kind of a universal kit, so you got to make it fit the body. But I really like how it ended up fitting, especially around these vents here in the body. I think once it's painted and I get the decals on it and stuff like that, I think it'll look really cool. It'll feel like it was made for the body and mold specifically to the body lines. I'm thinking I'll leave it there for part 1 though. I know that might not seem like a whole lot, but it did take me a whole lot of work to get just these flares on here. I spent the better part of a whole day just putting these flares on. In the second part, I think I want to create a spoiler back here. I might do one completely out of Lexan and styrene, maybe completely out of styrene, I'm not sure. Maybe we'll 3D print something. I don't really want to buy anything else. I kind of want to create something myself. So a spoiler, maybe a tow hook. Been kind of thinking about some window nets. Let me know what other scale accessories you think I ought to throw in down in the comments below. So some more scale accessories, painting and mounting it up, and then we'll just try our hardest not to scratch it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to leave a like if you did. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the rest of the build series. Also, let me know what color you think I ought to go with. I have a color in mind, maybe some graphics in mind, but let me know in the comments below what you think I should go with. As always, thanks again for watching. Peace.